How are you?
I'm all right.
Good. Oh, all right. Could you identify yourself for the record, please?
Sure. I'm Eric Sheptock, a homeless advocate here in Washington, D.C., and I will say that I signed up for this hearing over the phone, and I received some bad information, about what it was.
Fine. We're going to hear your testimony, Mr. Sheptock.
Okay, well, that's cool.
And may I ask the name of the person with you?
My name is Colonel Walker.
Ms. Walker?
Yes.
Okay, are you here on your own behalf?
I'm here as an advocacy for human conditions in homeless circumstances.
Okay, you have 3 minutes. Mr. Sheptock, are you here on your own behalf?
Yes, I am.
You're here. You have 3 minutes under committee rules.
Okay. Well, you might ask what a homeless advocate would have to say about Adult Protective Services, but Councilman Graham, I do commend you for coming down to the John L. Young Women's Shelter and for seeing the conditions down there. And as you know, there are many elderly homeless people who actually don't get connected to the services that they need. And you didn't go inside the CCNV shelter. We actually have a whole floor full of older men who have various needs that aren't being met. So I'm not sure if that fits squarely into what you're discussing here today. But I just do want to point out to you that there needs to be more connectivity between these different departments that fall within human services, and that there should be more done for the elderly homeless people. I just spoke to a woman who was very upset about an hour or so ago. She was very upset and disturbing a meeting, and she actually was ranting about the fact that no one is doing anything about these 75 and 85-year-old women who have to climb in bunks in order, when they go into the shelter at night, and who get put out at 5 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning, actually, to get awakened at 5 and put out at 7 and so forth. And so I guess I'll stop by saying that, is there anything that you can do to create greater connectivity between APS and homeless services so that our elderly homeless people are not going through the same things as the younger homeless people because they just can't bear the burden? Well, Councilman Graham, if I may, I should probably point out to you another atrocity that came to mind that you should know about. I knew a woman who became homeless at the age of 87 due to a condo conversion. She actually didn't know her rights at the time, so her landlord very bluntly told her, get out. The rent went from $750 a month to $2,400 a month because of the condo conversion. And this was back in 2007. She was 87 at the time. And I last saw her last year when she was 91. And so anyway, she got put out of that shelter. She went to the Nativity shelter in your ward, which is right by the apartment complex that burned down a few years ago. And the flames jumped over to the church where the shelter was and burned the roof. She went to the hospital for 4 days for smoke inhalation. Then she went to CCNV shelter. And while she was there, she was pushed down by accident and broke her hip. And then she went to Howard University Hospital, and it took about 10 of us to finally talk her into going into a nursing home. She didn't want to go. She'd always been independent. And so Pat Handy from DHS, myself, about 5 or 6 medical personnel, we all talked her into going to the nursing home near DuPont Circle. I rode with her in the ambulance, and she spent almost a year there recuperating, and then she got housed by permanent supportive housing. But that just goes to show that she got failed by the system in many different ways. She didn't know her rights, and that's why she left her place in the first place. And then she ended up getting injured, twice before she finally got housed. And so I do commend them for eventually housing her. I'm not sure if she's still living. I last saw her about 8 or 9 months ago. I don't know, what's happened to her since then.
First, this is a happy ending story. Right. If she got permanent supportive housing. I mean, this is good news. Second, and perhaps this has happened since she had a need, but we now have the Office of the Chief Tenant Advocate. And so there is actually an office for advocacy for tenants for these very situations in the District of Columbia. I'm proud to say I was the author of that law. And so when I had the oversight of DCRA. So this is an important step of progress. And so if there are people who are watching this hearing that have tenant issues, we do have the Office of the Tenant Advocate that can intervene. Now, let me respond. You have raised what I think is a very important point. And I didn't go to the CCNV shelter because that wasn't the purpose of my visit that night. I wasn't visiting CCNV. I was visiting John L. Young. So I went to John L. Young. And the reason why I think you're raising such an important point is I saw with my own eyes elderly, advanced elderly people struggling with the situation at John L. Young. And I've asked, my staff has vanished here because they went to get the statutory mission of Adult Protective Services. But I think, I like the point you've raised. I'm interested in the point that you've raised. Dr. Jones is here and Director Burns is here. And I want you to examine the circumstances at John L. Young. And I know that you respond to reports. This is a report I'm giving you now. And Mr. Sheptock has given you a report. And I can confirm the accuracy of what he said. And we may have a situation, I don't know, that's why I asked for the law, but there might be some intricacies here, but we may have a situation where the D.C. government is inadvertently, I'm going to say inadvertently because I'm sure it's inadvertent, is the abuser. And because of the circumstances, but I saw women of very advanced age, and you know, when you see this, you of course know what I'm talking about. You're stunned to think, oh my God, this is somebody who is in their 80s maybe, who is homeless, and in a facility which I've previously described as woefully substandard, and I hope that I hope DCHS is taking immediate steps to remedy that, but you probably are aware of my comments on this.
Okay, well,
let me start with the testimony that we've just heard from Mr. Sheptock. You state in your testimony, Director Burns, that Adult Protective Services is not intended as a general service and we understand that. That APS is limited to those adults who are in need of protective services because they are unable to protect themselves. I think this might very well describe some of the persons of advanced age who are in our shelters, who really need some protection. And again, you know, as something as simple but yet as important as whether you're on the bottom bunk or the top bunk can make all the difference for somebody who is in advanced age. And at John L. Young Shelter, when I was there, I was told it depends on a kind of a seniority system, not as to the age of the individual, but as to how long they had been coming or what time they arrived, whether they got the top bunk or the bottom bunk. That may or may not be accurate, but that's what I was led to believe. And we did have people of very advanced age there that night. Do you have a response to all of that?
Yes. Generally, the process is anybody who requires an accommodation, for example, just what you stated, either they're elderly or they're just in a medical condition or a physical condition where it's difficult for them to climb on a bunk bed, they would get a priority for a bottom bunk at all our shelters. Now, we can definitely look into at John Young to make sure that that's happening, but that's actually the protocol.
But do you have reports of abuse of the elderly in your shelters?
No, I haven't received. What we typically may receive from shelter staff is, as you described, some elderly who are in the shelters who need some significant services, or some elderly that they think may be in a self-neglecting situation. We will periodically get reports from the shelters, but I haven't got direct reports of someone being abused. Every now and then, not so much specific to an elderly person, but we do get complaints periodically about somebody that may be being victimized at a particular shelter, but it's not just specific to elderly.
Well, do you have any statistics on all of this?
Not Not so, what we can do is look at the reports in terms of reports or complaints that are made and get you some statistics on it.
I'd like to see that because, you know, this is a situation, as you well know, Mr. Swan, and I have a lot of respect for your knowledge and experience in this area, as do I have for all of the witnesses, including Director Burns and Dr. Jones. But as you well know, these are situations of a special vulnerability and sensitivity, and very often involving individuals who don't know their rights. They don't know. I didn't see anything on the bulletin boards saying, you know, if you feel that you are a senior, you're elderly, and you feel that you've been abused in some fashion, please let us know. And I'm not necessarily thinking that's a good idea. It might be a good idea, but the fact of the matter is a lot of folks like this really don't know what they're entitled to and what they're not entitled to. And we know that there are mental health issues among the homeless. We know there are substance abuse issues among the homeless, all of which may contribute to these types of problems in a specific case. But I think we should look at this. I think we should look at this. So if you could establish for me the policy which you've now described, which was not described the night I was there, and maybe it was described to one of the staff members accurately, but I remember distinctly being told that if you arrived after a particular point, or there were actually beds being reserved at John L. Young, because I was in the shelter before any of the women arrived, and there were belongings that were left on particular beds. So there's some kind of reservation system that is occurring. Am I wrong?
The way it generally works is if you were there the night before, then your bed will be held as long as you come back the next night by a specific time frame. Then you will be essentially guaranteed a bed if you come back the next day. That's generally how the system works. And going back to what you also said is that there is general protocols that state that there are some things that are given to clients that have been there for a longer period of time, but the protocol I described supersedes that process. So if I need a reasonable accommodation, that I need a lower bunk, then that process would supersede the general protocol that may state, because I have seniority, I may get choice.
And you don't know, and maybe this comes to your attention when people are injured. Do you have reports of injuries at John L. Young?
Off the top of my head, I can't say that I've had any recent reports of any injuries, but what we do track is two things. Police calls or police reports to specific shelters, and then also complaints through our complaint line.
Are there any special, is there any special emphasis or effort being made relating to those of advanced stage who are in the shelter system?
Yeah, what typically, and CC&V, as Mr. Sheptock mentioned, is typically where most, I would say, the higher percentage of our elderly are, particularly because it's not a 12-hour shelter and you don't have to leave in the mornings. So it's more accommodating for them. There's also the Unity Clinic on site there as well. So that's one
on site where?
At CC&V.
Right.
So one of the reasons why there are more there, and that's typically where we like to accommodate our seniors, is because there's more services. You can stay 24 hours and you have the access to the clinic there.
But you can't stay 24 hours at John L. Young.
Not at John L.
You have to leave John L. Young.
Yes.
Every morning at what time?
At 7 a.m.
Regardless of your age.
Regardless of your age, unless like I said, there's always accommodations made. For example, if someone's sick or there's a reasonable accommodation.
But just being old and infirm would not be sufficient.
Well, it depends. If their physical state was one in which they had mobility issues or problems like that, then could be accommodation made for them.
I think we need to have some facts. I mean, do you have any documentation of how often that happens?
We can get that from the staff there, yes.
All right. Can we, I also asked, by the way, for a report on whether the district government was unwittingly being an abuser of the elderly and adults because of the conditions at John L. Young. And you weren't here. This is the staff director of the Committee of Human Services. And I want to make sure we have a follow-up on that as well. It's an interesting point, and I just would like to be reassured that we're doing everything we can.